This is an official Toastmaster training from Toastmasters International. They have presentations for different aspects of speaking. This is one of them. What is body language? Who would like to answer that? Lois?
Body language is the way that you stand. It's the way you communicate without words.
Yes. Would anyone like to add to that? Body language basically is gestures. Gestures are to a speech what pictures are to a printed article. Famous words. Soon to be, I'm sure. There's three categories of body language. Facial expressions. We're going to talk about all these in detail. Hands and arms. And finally, what you do with your whole body. Facial expressions. Lorraine, what does this facial expression convey?
Constipation.
No! Michael,
I have not eaten my broccoli.
Defiance? Anger, maybe? Yes. Okay, hit something on this thing. Okay. What about this one? Alex Scott.
Happiness.
Happiness. Yes. Julie.
Oh my God.
Concern? Embarrassment? Yeah, Julie in the back.
Hey, baby.
Hey, baby. That's right. The face conveys a lot of meaning. When you think about it, you watch somebody on TV, you see their head, their talking head. It conveys a lot of meaning. The face is the primary conveyor of meaning, especially with certain emotions like the one we've just seen. It's very difficult to convey sincerity with just your hands or where you stand in the room. The face does a tremendous amount of conveyance of meaning. When you're giving a speech, make sure you pay attention to your face and what your face is saying to the people. It's the clearest communication. Another part of facial expressions is your eye contact. Why is eye contact so important? David?
Gives people the sense that you're making connection with them.
Yes, exactly. That's almost word for word what you just said.
So the slide too.
I just typed this while you said it. Personal contact. It's about giving the impression of personal sincerity, personal contact. I'm talking to you. If I'm talking and I'm looking at the floor, yeah, I really want to congratulate you for your anniversary today and your birthday. It's not going to be sincere. Talking and speaking to the person means looking at them, making eye contact. When we're up in front of the room, a lot of times we don't do that because we're nervous or whatever. Work on that. It really adds a lot to your gestures. It falls into facial expressions, gestures. Very important. Moving on. The next type of gestures is your hands and your arms. What do you do with these things? You hold them here, put them here, in the pocket, play with my ring or my tie or my belt or... Somebody does this all the time. I'm not going to mention that. There's three types of gestures. Conventional. The book likes to categorize everything. So here we go. Right? If you go like this, everybody knows what that is. What about, right? Motorcycle? Driving. These are gestures that are conventional. Everyone knows what they are. There's also descriptive gestures. Descriptive would be, for example, how big something is, how many there are, or other gestures that are descriptive, like your body shape. And then finally, we had emotional gestures. Like when you're angry. A lot of that's with the face, but the hands and arms go with that as well. The reason I'm mentioning all this is because I want you guys to think about gestures as part of your communication in your speech. When you prepare a speech, I'd like you to think about what gestures you're going to put in there, because that's part of the communication. I'm just prepping you for later. The third type of gesture is whole body. Now that, again, has two categories. One of them is your stance. Do you stand erect, upright? Do you slouch over? These indicate emotion. They indicate a message. The other part of whole body movement is where you stand. I think I got those backwards. If I'm giving a speech and I want to transition from one point to the next, I can literally move and it can go on to the next chapter of my speech through physical movement. Another thing I can do with movement is I can play a conversation. I could be one person, and I can simply move, and I could be the other person. And it gives the audience a visual. And it helps them see what is going on in the speech. Your stance should be relaxed and balanced. This helps with nervousness. If I stand nervous, I can't even do it. I'm so practiced as a Toastmaster. If I stand with my feet planted on the ground, with my weight distributed evenly between my 2 feet and my arms at my sides, it actually helps me feel less nervous. If you're nervous in front of an audience, just stand with your knees just barely bent, erect, almost like you're in one of those Qigong poses. And it actually helps with nervousness. It helps you feel less nervous. It's also an excellent place from which to gesture. Covered most of that. Okay, moving on. Movement. I think I got ahead of myself on the slide. One more thing about movement I forgot to mention. It helps you address the different parts of the audience. If I'm over here, I can address these guys. Physically moving, I can now address these guys. That's part of gestures. Now let's talk about some tips. When you gesture and you're talking to one person and you want to make a point, you kind of get close. You kind of get in their face a little bit. You interact, and your box, so to speak, is a certain size. When you're in front of 100 people or 1,000 people, your gestures have to be really big so people can see you. Keep in mind how big your gestures are. A lot of times we get up here and we make our big gestures big. They're really small. You got to remember, you're in front of people, you got to gesture big. Make sense? Now, some people gesture all the time. Just like some people talk really loud all the time throughout the entire speech. It's a loud speech. They're talking loud the whole time. And then they want to make a point. So they talk loud to make their point, but it doesn't sound like anything because they've been talking loud the whole time. Gestures can be similar. If I'm constantly flailing away with my arms, and then I want to flail away to make a point, it's not going to be made. Gestures you can use sparingly so that when you actually have a gesture that you want to emphasize and you use it, it can add a lot more drama to your speech. And of course, you want to have your gestures match your words. You don't want to look angry and you're saying, "Thank you very much." It doesn't convey the meaning. You want the meaning to match the gesture. And put some thought into the gestures that you're using. We're going to get that in a second when we basically on the next slide. In the meantime, before we get to that, I want to talk about distracting gestures. Some of us make distracting gestures. A lot of times they're not thought of. We do them accidentally. And that's what we're here at Toastmasters to help. Like our awe counter helps us hear things that are distracting. Our body language master, I'm sure, will bring out gestures that she's seen. Get distracted. Nervous mannerisms. I talked about some of these already. Putting your hands in your pocket, playing with your tie. Some people like to dance in front of the audience. It's very distracting. And again, your stance can help reduce that. If you stand purposely, plant your feet, it's very difficult to dance back and forth and cross your legs and lean forward. When you have your feet planted, it helps with your gestures. I can see you all are excited. We're almost done. Practice with gestures. It's just like in my class. You have to see yourself. You have to get feedback. That's how you get better. Mirrors are powerful. Even more powerful is our video recorder. Video record yourself giving your speech and put some thought into what gestures will work for you. Another thing you can do is give your speech to somebody you trust as far as a friend or family member. They'll tell you. And while you're practicing, you'll find, just like when we do the awe counter and then we listen to the radio and we hear ahs on the radio that we never heard before, like these people just started talking with ahs. It's amazing. Pay attention, because as you practice, you're going to notice what gestures other people use. And you'll start to incorporate good gestures. Wow, that was really powerful. That whole motorcycle thing, that works. Right? To wrap it up, this is a quote from Christopher Andre. I don't even know how to say his last name, but I loved the quote. It has to do with musical conductors. When you're listening to music, and you go to a show and you see the orchestra, there's not really much to see. People are just playing their instruments. What's the show? It's the conductor. He's the guy that brings energy and enthusiasm to the work. You guys can read this. If you really think about it, it's a great quote. And it has everything to do with gestures. Please take the time to incorporate gestures into your speech to add emphasis and power to your message. Mr. Toastmaster.